Welcome to the Consummate Athlete podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm excited. We have one of our favorite guests back.
I think actually she might be one of our most frequent guests, which I mean is pretty exciting to say.
I would say, you think this is 3?
I think this is 3. Might even be 4.
Okay, yeah, she's definitely in the upper echelon of our podcast, if not many of the other pursuits in her life.
It's true. We are talking about 7-time world champion adventure athlete Rebecca Rusch, here to talk today about her new podcast, Brainstorm, which she has actually been doing with another longtime guest friend, amazing human being, Celine Yeager. Yeah, super exciting to talk to Rebecca all about, her journey through concussions after a really bad crash. It took her 3 years to kind of really feel back to normal. And she's been, really leaning into talking about everything that happens with a concussion. Even, hers was so quote unquote like mild when it first happened with her really bad crash. But we've seen this with other athletes and, hearing from her, a mild concussion can be a big freaking deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we still don't understand a lot, right? And things can evolve depending on how what we do after that as well, right? And that's the thing we're still trying to learn about is the best steps to take after you get a concussion and even what it is. So excited for this. We've certainly done a few episodes around concussion, so it's certainly something we're curious about. But yeah, really excited to have another look at this today.
Yeah, definitely. We've done episodes, and it's something we both, I would say, have a good amount of unfortunate experience with, and we've both been very lucky to have bounced back from concussions.
Especially because a lot of mine, at least, are, before we even talked about it as anything, you had to do something about. So yeah, that's it's a very important thing for sure. And I'm excited for this series. It's a 4-part series, right?
Yeah, so it's a 4-part series, and actually the last episode will have just come out yesterday when this episode is going live. So you can actually go over to Brainstorm. It's presented by Feisty Media, which you might remember from when I was running the Business of Fitness podcast. I was doing it with Feisty. Super fun. Really cool team of people over there. But yeah, look up Brainstorm wherever you get podcasts. It's a 4-episode series, and just, really informative, really great, and just super cool to hear from really smart women talking about really important topics. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into this amazing chat with the one, the only, Rebecca Rusch. Rebecca, welcome back to the Consummate Athlete podcast. I think you're actually in our top echelon of repeat guests. So I'm very excited.
Lucky me. Thanks.
I don't know if lucky is the right word, but you always just have such good stuff to talk about. So, we love having you on, and huge congrats on your podcast. That is awesome.
Thank you. It's a short, limited edition podcast series. I do not yet have my own podcast, but yeah, this was really exciting to launch this 4-part series and tell a pretty important story. So thanks for talking about it with me.
Yeah, of course. So we're talking Brainstorm. We're talking concussions. Of course, everyone should head to the show notes to get the link to the 4-part podcast. I believe actually when this episode drops, your last episode will have just dropped. So people can kind of get a teaser and then get fully caught up on everything. This is, a topic that we are hearing about more and more, both fortunately and unfortunately, I think. Unfortunately in that concussions are happening, but fortunately in that at least now we're having these conversations.
When I did this in partnership with a really good friend of mine, the co-author of my book, a teammate, Celine Yeager. And she's a really good friend. And I've been on this almost 3 years now, long-term concussion recovery that has been really rocky. I'm not going to lie. And Celine and she's like, let's just help get your story out and help more people. So this podcast series, Brainstorm, is really about my journey, how I navigated it or didn't navigate it, and what I learned along the way, and I'm still learning. And the goal really is to help more people find resources and better care, because the bottom line is basically, one, it's an invisible injury, so people can't see it, so they think you're fine. And then two, our healthcare professionals just don't really know what to do about brain injury. So, like you said, I'm excited to put it into the conversation. Of course, I don't want anyone to be injured, but it's really common. The stats that Celine has shared with me is that in 30% of people in the US in their lifetime will experience a concussion. And women tend to have longer term symptoms. About half those people are going to have long term symptoms, and half won't. And there's lots of times people hit their head and they get checked out and they're fine. So, but there is a pretty big population that I really had no idea has been going through concussion recovery. And what we're hearing more and more with the release of this podcast series is that there's a lot of people who just aren't getting good care and they don't know what to do. And that was exactly my experience. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, I want to talk about your accident, your experience, and I think what was so interesting to me when I first was, seeing it and listening to it is that when you had that crash, your original concussion got labeled as being mild. And I
Right.
mean, how often, especially women, how often do we go, to the doctor or tell someone about something like that and it's like, oh, you'll be fine. Like if you don't have severe symptoms right off the bat, it's probably nothing, or like take a couple days easy and then you'll be right back.
Yeah, and I mean and technically I did have a mild concussion. I didn't lose consciousness. I didn't have a brain bleed. I didn't, fracture my skull. So by the medical definition, it is a mild concussion. However, symptoms can be less than mild, and the symptoms can be long-term and really devastating. And so I guess I was technically correctly diagnosed as mild concussion. The problem was that then, to your point, they just send you home and don't give you an actual protocol. And it took me
Mhm.
quite a while to find a concussion specialist who then did look at my symptoms and start to go down the route of personalized care for me. So it's kind of a little bit of a misnomer. Mild, yes, it was, because I didn't lose consciousness and I got myself out of there myself. And so, yeah, some of the terminologies are really confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so interesting because if you just take the terminology and shift it, we don't need to say like, why do we have to call it a mild concussion when we know that the symptoms can be quite severe? I feel like we need a different term for it or something. I don't know what the term is,
Yeah,
but
yeah, and or just conversation. Yeah, it is kind of a weird term, mild concussion. But like I said, it can be a mild hit, but severe symptoms. And so that's really what we're finding is that, concussion specialists have categorized concussions into vestibular, ocular, the types of symptoms you're having, and then the care. Sorry, pausing. That was my stupid phone. The care for that can be targeted based on the types of symptoms you're having. But yeah, I had no idea. I had this back crash. I had no idea I was in for going on 3 years now of, the worst injury of my life. I've never really been injured on my bike or in any of my sports, not in a long-term way like this. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think we often, if you can't see blood, you can't see anything, that then we think we're okay. And especially athletes who have sort of a hard charging personality and like, hey, I'll just muscle through this. If you can't see something on an MRI or any other type of, test, then you think, well, is there really anything wrong with me? And that's really what I'm learning is to pay attention to that. Yeah, these are concussion symptoms. Like when I finally read the list of all the things I was going through, it's like, oh, yeah, I have all those things. And that is what a concussion is. It looks a lot like depression, anxiety, and, some other things that often are symptoms, but not necessarily the cause of why you're feeling that way.
Mhm. And I think what's really difficult about it is, if you sprain your ankle, as is, my current case, there is a recovery protocol. Like you sort
Yeah,
of know how to deal with it, but it
yeah.
seems as though not even the people who are the most well versed in concussions have any idea exactly. Like there's no pill, there's no one treatment plan. It's so just like open to interpretation, I guess is maybe the best way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more complications with the brain because obviously it's your central command center. It rules everything that your body's doing, from digestion to skin to hearing. Like your brain is doing all of that. And so that's where they do look at symptoms and say, okay, you're having eye symptoms. We may not necessarily totally understand why, but we can treat the nervous system and the ocular system in that way. So there are protocols that the NFL, Ultimate Fighting, and the military have done a ton of research in concussion. I've started to learn about some of that. The hard part is it's not packaged for the general population. So there is a ton of good information out there. It's just not brought into kind of a cohesive little checklist for people. So this is part of what I hope to do. And we do have a downloadable PDF on the Brainstorm podcast. And I plan to continue to flesh that out of like, step one, here's, if you hit your head, here are some things to ask, and here's some people to go find, or here are the types of specialists that can help you. And so that is the goal, is to actually, and Celine's been amazing at pulling different research projects and information and kind of put it forth in a bit of a cliff notes for people. Because one, when your brain is injured, it's really hard to scour the internet for your own health care.
Right. This is like a PDF that you need to download now before you have the issue.
Well,
Have this
and
ready to
that's,
go.
or your friends and family and the people around you. And this is what I found I didn't do well, is I hid my injury. I pretended like I was fine, like I got this, for various reasons. One, I didn't want to admit anything was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't want people to think, this hardcore athlete who's supposed to have it all dialed really didn't. Like there was a lot of shame and fear and unknown, and that's one of the main things that I recommend in the last episode is you got to be really verbal with the people around you about, I don't feel right. I don't know what's going on, but can you help me? And
Mhm.
I'm even continuing to have to do this 3 years in. I'm finding I still have, if I'm on the computer too long, or I have too much sensory information coming in, that I get frustrated or get a headache. And I still have to admit and tell people, hey, I'm still injured.
Yeah.
Like I can't do that thing today. And that's really hard for someone who is a high achiever and is used to being able to multitask and do all those things. So one of the biggest things is the people around somebody with brain injury need to help that person. And even if they don't know what to do or the questions to ask, that's sort of the hope of this podcast series, is like, okay, ask for this, ask for that, ask them about eye test, ask them about balance. I had a neck injury that like nobody really, it's a real holistic approach to brain injury, because people, your neck, your eyes, your balance, there's all sorts of things tied into it. So it really isn't, like you said, there isn't one pill, there isn't one protocol, but based on the symptoms that you have, a specialist can kind of put together your roadmap.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And okay, so what is your advice for really navigating the specialists? Because I know you not only, were going to doctors, you also did do therapy, you did like psychedelic therapy, you did kind of like the whole gamut of like all of the different ways to handle treatment. And I know with the US healthcare system being what it is, I imagine that was not the easiest thing to figure out, and probably not the cheapest, if we're being honest.
Yeah, no, it was time consuming, as it was expensive. It was super frustrating. My initial primary care physician didn't refer me
Yeah.
to anyone. And I asked her, like, can I get an MRI? And she said, no, you don't have a baseline. So that's the first thing that any healthy person can do is go ahead and get a baseline. There's like free online, there's resources like that where you can kind of do these little tests. So these little computer tests, and you get your own baseline. So that is one thing I would recommend for a healthy person, is to just like you kind of, your heart rate, your sleep patterns, your diet, like knowing where you rank on sort of brain function and things like that, and balance. That's great to have, because then immediately after concussion, you can, end up repeat those tests and sort of
Mhm.
see what's going on. So that, yeah, I didn't get any referrals initially. I had to seek a lot of that care myself. I did finally find a primary care physician that I switched to, who is a little bit concussion informed. And he did start putting me down the route of like, check your eyeglass prescription, talk to this person. So he was kind of getting me in the area of addressing symptoms, but it wasn't until I found a specialist in Salt Lake City. But yeah, I had to travel there, stay there for 2 days. Some of my insurance covered it, but it really was a little bit of a treasure hunt for me to find what worked. And so there were kind of a lot of facets. So that concussion specialist who works with the US ski team, he's a great guy. He was like the first one to be like, okay, you're not making this up. We've seen this before. And that just felt to me like, okay, I'm not alone, and there's medical care, and they were great. So they really gave me the go ahead to start exercising again. They tested, because I was afraid to elicit headaches. I was afraid to elicit symptoms. So they gave me the go ahead for that. They really looked at my neck, and he explained to me how if your neck, your eyes, if you're getting sensory overload from some other part that's coming into your body, your brain has to process all that information. So that's often what makes the headaches, because the brain is tired. It's working overtime to like on proprioception, like where are you in the world? And that was part of my thing, is my neck was so stiff that like my balance was off, and then that was making my brain work extra hard, which was giving me headaches. So he kind of explained how all these things fit together, and that even if you don't have a structural brain injury, the communication system gets disrupted. And that made a lot of sense to me, of like, okay, I don't have a lesion, I don't have a brain bleed, I don't have a bruise, but it's really that like the communication and all the nervous system communication gets disrupted. And if you don't repattern that stuff in the right way, your brain doesn't heal. It just sort of stays stuck. And that's the really unprofessional way to explain it. But it was nice for me to understand what is going on, and how something like a lot of people talking to me at once could make my brain tired, because
Mhm.
it's just a lot of processing, and we have no idea how much we're processing in the world, and especially with digital and the way we function now. We're even a healthy brain is in sensory overload, and I believe that's part of the reason we have such a mental health crisis, is that people are getting overloaded by their work, their Instagram, their everything, blah, blah, blah. And so even for a healthy person, a lot of this stuff that I'm learning is stuff that I will carry the rest of my life, even when I'm recovered, like focusing on one thing at a time, turning off, not running with a podcast on all the time. There's these layers that we put on, and I really have noticed with a brain injury, I can't layer like that. And so that is part of the care. And to come back to your question, it was a really multifaceted approach. I mean, I worked on my diet and my microbiome, and, because there is a lot of connection between your gut and your brain health. I worked on fascia and mobility. Got new eyeglasses. Changed my computer screen, got out in nature, picked up meditation. So all of these, it's not any one of these things that were the key. It was really all of them. And if that we go back to the beginning of the conversation, the brain is a multifaceted tool. And so the recovery also needs to be multifaceted. So when I found that concussion specialist, that was just the start of like getting good care. But I do suggest, kind of based on my learnings, it's not one doctor or expert who is going to, be able to handle all the symptoms. There is a concussion specialist going to be able to point you in the right directions for things and be able to advocate for you and explain it. But then there are some other layers like meditation and breathing and your diet and your exercise that all go into it. And that was the first thing he prescribed, to be honest with you, was like, get back outside and start exercising. And the reason for that, I didn't know this, but when we exercise, you might know this, our brain, well, we produce all sorts of neurochemicals like serotonin and other things, but we also produce BDNF, BD, brain derived neurotropic factor.
Right.
And what they say is that's like miracle growth for your brain, that it really does light up your brain. And exercise is how we do that for a healthy brain or an injured brain. And so that is one of the first things that I just sort of stopped moving. And I think that really is what spiraled me downward, especially as a lifelong athlete. I was scared to move and I was unmotivated and I thought I was going to elicit headaches. And that was the worst thing I could do. So the protocol really is to get moving again as quickly as you can in a safe way so you don't hit your head again, because that's the number one thing. Because a second concussion during an injured time is really bad news. But that doesn't mean you can't get on a stationary bike, you can't walk, you can't, do anything that won't involve falling down. And I just basically for almost a year, I really sort of didn't move. And yeah, for an athlete, that made me feel pretty bad. And then this spiral of like joint stiffness, depression, all this I think could have been alleviated if I got moving faster.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that's such a common experience because I mean, not only is it, you're nervous about kicking off the, headaches and symptoms happening. I think that's also like kind of almost like the old school approach to concussions was you stay in a quiet, dark room with zero stimulation and you don't move. Like that's kind of like what we have been told, like up to pretty recently, I would say. So it's completely understandable that that would be in your head, right? But then you're exactly right. You stop exercising and you're going to have kind of all of these downstream effects that are going to negatively impact your health, that are going to make everything even worse.
And then you feel worse and then you still don't want to go out. And then, and then your sleep's disrupted. And it really was a super downward spiral. I mean, I think of it this way, between cognitive rest and physical rest are two different things. And even now, I need to have cognitive rest and physical exercise. And the physical exercise doesn't really kick me off into symptoms. It's the cognitive overstimulation that really does. And it's understanding that people want to rest. And if you think, okay, we'll take your ankle injury and your PT for it. So your PT is going to push you and it's going to hurt. Like they're going to be like, you have to do these things. And our normal reaction with an injury is we don't want to. We want to guard. You don't want to move it. You just want to let it sit. And your PT is like, no, you have to push into your symptoms. And you're like, but that hurts. Yeah. And the way some of the specialists explained it to us is that safely pushing into your symptoms, just up to feeling them and then backing off, is actually part of the same recovery that you would have with your ankle.
Yep.
And so there's some things like the Buffalo treadmill test of like basically gradually moving up in aerobic exercise to, elicit symptom, then come back down, elicit symptom, and then come back down. And with a guided professional, but that gives you sort of like something to go off of instead of like something that's been studied and researched, and to not be afraid to just touch your symptoms like you are with any sort of PT, because you have to sort of push a little to get the recovery. And we're so afraid, me included, to do that with the brain because we're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to like explode my brain.
Well, yeah, and with the brain, the second you get like even a hint of a headache, I imagine
Mhm.
at this point, you're so aware of how you're feeling that like
Right.
the second you get like that tiny little niggle of a headache, it's like panic. Or like probably you're through that at this point. But I imagine at some point that was like you
It
say, the
was
like the edging into the discomfort, you'd have that and you would just like assume that it was gonna like explode.
right. The difference initially, yes, it was panic. It's like, oh no, I can't do that. I just have to go home and lay down. Now that I understand and I have some tools to basically down regulate my nervous system, manage my nervous system, I feel a headache and it's like, okay, I'm going to sit and do some deep breathing. I'm going to go for a walk in nature. I'm going to, meditate for a little while. So I have tools when I feel that instead of just being like, oh no, I'm going to do nothing. I can actually pull a little bit from the toolbox of like, okay, my nervous system and my brain are getting really tired. Um, I have tools now instead of a complete shutdown to actively, come down from that. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And okay, for a very hard charging type A personality that I know we have in common here, how was the meditation side of things? You mentioned that, and I would love to hear about the journey to like accepting meditation as part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, obviously we've all heard about it. And we're like, yeah, yeah, we should meditate, but I'm too
Um,
busy. I can't fit in 10 minutes a day, you know? And quite honestly, I was so down in like a really deep cave that I'm like, I will try anything. And I've dabbled with meditation a little bit and used the apps and they're great and they calm you down. What really helped for me was a group called Love Your Brain. And that's founded by a former professional snowboarder and his brother, and they have free resources on their website. So I joined one of their 6 week, I was just like, okay, I'm going to join this 6 week free community. And that was pretty great because, you have a once a week Zoom call with about 10 other people who are going through concussion. And this was an athlete group of people. And then they give you little homework exercises. And one of them is a guided yoga class that they give you. And so I did it because I'm like, you know what? I don't know what else to do. And it started to stick, and now I am pretty regular with it. But I will say meditation can look a lot of different ways. It can, and the goal is not to be a good meditator. The
yes.
goal is to bring that kind of mindset into your everyday life. And so it's if you put it in a sports analogy, it's like kind of like doing intervals or something. Your goal is not to be really good at doing intervals. You do a little session so that you're just overall generally a better athlete. And so it's a
Hmm.
little bit like that. And so, it's like doing practices to bring that kind of mindfulness and attention and awareness into your everyday life. So when you are walking the dog, you're like noticing what's going on around you instead of being caught in a loop of like, oh, I've got all this stuff I need to do at home. And that's where I find the meditation has really helped me. It breaks this sort of like ongoing dialogue that so many of us have in our head from the moment we wake up, like, oh my gosh, I got to do this day and this day and this day and this day. It's like allows me to quiet the mind a little so that when I am working, I'm just working. And when I am walking the dogs, I'm just walking the dogs. And but yeah, like anything, it doesn't come easily. But I do really notice that it helps me a lot. Same with breathing exercises. A lot of these things that I dabbled with as an athlete, but I didn't really need to lean on because
Hmm.
I wasn't hurt and
Yeah.
I could sort of get by. I think it's a
Yeah.
little bit like how when you're younger, you could get by with less sleep, or you could get by, partying the night before and not have a hangover.
Totally.
So these things are things that I think concussion or not are important. I want to be a lifelong athlete. And so bringing in some of these tools I know are going to help me for the future. Like I said, I'm still recovering and I'm sort of not back to kind of the athletic activity that I would like to be. And that's really hard to admit. But my hope is that, I'll be stronger and better because of all of this sort of brain training I've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's funny as you were listing those things off, you're like meditation and doing mobility and working on my gut. All like I'm like, oh, right, these are the things that we all know that we're supposed to be doing as athletes, and maybe we're doing them to some extent. We're like, I have
Yeah.
meditate 10 minutes on my to-do list every day. I do like a little bit of yoga while I'm watching like reality TV. But like if you ask me, do I really do my meditation and do I really do my mobility? Ew. I'm at
Well,
like
and
a
often
50%.
it takes trauma sometimes or something really bad happening that is a wake-up call for us,
Hmm.
to do the stuff we know we should be doing. And yeah, I mean, that is the part of this concussion that I'm grateful for because I'm learning so much more about my brain and my body. And I do believe I'll be healthier in the long term, by adding these layers. But oh man, like I wouldn't wish this journey on anybody because
Yeah.
it's been the hardest thing I've done in my life. And I've done some hard things.
I was gonna say, I literally wrote that down at the top of our conversation here. I mean, you are actually known as the Queen of Pain, um, which
Right.
feels like very profound in this case. So, I mean, talk to me about that identity because I feel like you've probably had to, really think about how that identity like works now, and even as you were going through this, because as an endurance athlete, you've always been able to lean into pain, and pain's almost been, we'll call it a positive in a lot, like in a lot of these endurance races and stuff. Um, but now, obviously, I have to imagine like you have like mixed emotions about pain now.
Yeah, and I mean, if physical pain, just like going out and hard charging up a hill or doing something like that, like that feels good. And any athlete can admit that that is, yes, that's pain, but you've chosen to be there.
Yeah.
You're like motivated to get to the top of the hill. There's other people around you, and you know that when you reach that finish line or the top of the mountain, that there's this celebratory, you're proud of yourself for doing it. That's a completely different kind of pain than emotional or injury pain. And I think any human can understand the difference between those things. So yeah, I'm known as Queen of Pain for the hard stuff I do, but like quite honestly, none of that has been anything I could compare to, with this kind of like emotional pain and this
Yeah.
sort of not knowing and like not having a trail map. All of my sports, even if I was lost, I could navigate my way out and I had the stuff with me that I needed, like
Hmm.
to survive, or I could route find my way. This is the only thing I've done that literally there was no trail map. I had no trail map. I had no teammates. I had no resources, and literally was just sitting in the dark, lost, going, I
Hmm.
don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And no finish line, which again, for the type A's like us, like to not be able to have like, okay, I've done X, Y, Z, like now I'm good, right?
Right.
And
Yeah,
that's
it's a very
that's not how this works.
non-linear process, whereas sport is, I love sport, and it's like our best playing ground, practice ground to, learn resilience and failure and all these like, you know, great things that we can take in the rest of our life. But it is really pretty simple, doing sport. You sign up for something, you do the training or you don't do the training, and you go do it. And you finish or you don't finish. Like, yeah, I mean, unless you're doing, things with really high consequence, like I did or something, and even then you've prepared, you took the equipment, you planned for it. But this concussion thing has been like a new frontier that is so unfamiliar to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I'm still in it, you
Yeah.
know. And
Yeah.
I think that's the hard part. People can look at me or we can have this conversation and we're like, great, awesome, you made it through all that. And it's like, no, I had to, in preparation for this, podcast, I had to go walk my dogs and I did do meditation and I drank a bunch of tea so I was hydrated so that when I get off this call, hopefully I won't have a headache. So yeah, but people can't see that, and it's actually still really hard to admit it because
Yeah.
it's like I don't want to admit that I'm weak. I don't want to admit that I can't do everything that I want to do right now or handle it all. And so that part of it is actually with releasing this podcast and talking about it openly, it's really uncomfortable for me. Because as you touched on, my identity is somebody who can handle it all and is this pro athlete and, entrepreneur and Emmy winner and all these things. And so
Yeah.
admitting that I'm still struggling through this, it's something different for me that I've really never done in my career. And again, the hope is not for people to feel sorry for me. The hope is that somebody else with a brain injury is going to navigate it better by
Mhm.
me being really honest about how hard it is.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, you are, handling it all like a total boss. Like you are making it through. But yeah, I can imagine that it's, yeah, been a very stressful thing, not only like adding a, pretty intense podcast to your plate, but also doing so while kind of almost like coming out of the closet about this injury and really like having
Yeah.
to talk to people like me and get get pretty vulnerable, and kudos for doing that, because I cannot imagine that it's easy in any way, shape, or form.
Well, what's been awesome is I have a great teammate in Celine Yeager. I mean, she's been absolutely like essential. This wouldn't have happened without her and her kindness and like her picking up, like, and, you know, doing stuff that I couldn't do. So she's been super essential. And the response from people has actually really kind of motivated me and lifted me up because there's so many people who are like, oh my gosh, I had that same thing. Thank you. And so it's like you feel like you're part of this community that you never really wanted to be part
Yeah.
of. But I definitely feel a lot less alone in communicating this. And I feel like it's helping people.
Yeah.
So that does make me really happy, even though it's awkward. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like you said, I'm coming out of the closet about something I've been hiding for a few years.
Hmm. Yeah. And yes, completely agree. Celine is one of the best humans on the planet. Yeah, one of my favorite people, and I want to be her when I grow up. Yeah.
I mean, she's really motivated and paved the way for so many women in media, in sport, and just a really great friend. And, as hard charging as she is, she has a very intuitive, gentle side that I've seen with this brainstorm project. So thank you, Celine.
Yes. Yeah, seriously. Okay. That actually begs this very practical question. You do have so many things on the go. You have Rebecca's Private Idaho, I know just happened. You have all of your other stuff going on and the podcast, obviously. So how have you, like, what are the, changes that you've made to kind of make all of that stuff continue while you're not as able to do everything and be on your computer for 15 hours a day, like I'm sure you have been in the past. A lot of people are in this kind of situation, and I'm sure could use tips from someone who has a ton of things on the go and needed to back them all down, but also wasn't telling
Yeah.
anyone that she was backing them all down. So this all happens very like secretly.
I have a freaking great team behind me. I work with a woman, Era Hardin, who has been with me for 4 years, and she literally has been running Be Good Foundation, Rusch Ventures, RPI. She really has been really stepped up into a leadership role. And the cool thing that's happened though is as a company, as we've grown, as an entrepreneur and like running my own businesses for so long, it was hard for me to step away from and not have my hand in all of the things of the business. And actually, this forced a really good leadership change for us where I would just share my vision and Era would be like, okay, I can put that into operation. So we really did kind of dial in our business structure, and our communication has gotten way more efficient so that we're not on a billion meetings. So, I couldn't have done it alone. I have a team behind me. Another big factor is I brought people in. And so I did this year actually, or the end of last year, I actually sold operational ownership of Private Idaho to Bike Monkey, which is our event company that's been doing it for years. And so we agreed to a partnership where I'm front and center. I'm doing all the Be Good stuff. My name is on it, but I don't have to run the event. The Carlos is and Bike Monkey, they're professionals at running events. And so we did a really cool business arrangement, and technically they own Rebecca's Private Idaho, and I get to show up. So that removed a huge amount of burden from us, and it needed to happen anyway, concussion or not, because the event has grown to a capacity where I couldn't do that, plus Be Good Foundation, plus my Rusch Ventures business. And so it was a long time coming, but that happened last year, which was great. I'm pretty excited about that. And that has allowed Era and myself to really focus on sort of me more as an athlete, as a mentor, as a teacher, as a guide. And some of the areas that we're working in that I'm really excited about is in the human performance space, not only for young and up and coming athletes as kind of a mentor teacher, but also in the, high performing human space. So, getting people who work in the corporate world or in any job to embrace their inner athlete and to function as an athlete. Because we already talked about sleep, meditation, being active. Anyone who wants to perform at a high level at any job needs to do those things.
Yeah.
And so it's been a really cool morphing transition into how do I use my skill set from 4 decades of being an entrepreneur and an athlete. How do I actually share that with other people? So there is a cool transition happening, and probably the concussion, the sort of halting of hard charging, going to competitions, doing all that, it did give me the space and Era the space to do business planning. And we spent the last few years really being like, okay, what is this business now and how is it evolving? And because I don't want to shut down my business. I love what I do, but how do we bring what I have in a different way? And so I appreciate you asking that. It's been really exciting, but there's been a lot of internal, we hired a business consultant. We've worked with like some business mentors and structurally really laid things out in a better way so that we can work and have fun with it, but not kill ourselves. Because that's not the point, is it?
Yeah. Well, I think what's so interesting about these injuries is what they bring up kind of within the rest of your life. It really makes you have to, think about how you've been operating, and
Right.
Some stuff that needs to change in like the acute sense and like has to change for this like 2 months while you do XYZ recovery. But then there are these chronic things where it's like, oh right, I have not actually been like doing this as efficiently as I could have done. And I think you're so lucky to have a team around you that really like clearly leaned into that and, worked with you to figure out like, okay, what makes sense going forward, not just from like a brain health perspective, but even honestly, it sounds like you're in a better business position than you were before, really.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Hard things do shine a light on areas that we can maybe improve upon, and forcing me to stop, which I haven't stopped in my whole life, but being forced to stop was really an introspection and really a inward journey. Not easy at all. But definitely, yeah, did force the hand, so to speak. I will say, I mean, I feel so lucky. If I was in a different situation, I would be jobless right now, and I would be worrying about finances and what am I going to, I mean, so a lot of people, I can't emphasize, a lot of people with concussion, they can't work. I mean, and I wasn't really working, but I had a team to lift me up. And so you add on the layer of like, you're not well, you're injured, you're in for a long recovery possibly, and then also you're financially unstable. I mean, that talk about a downward spiral of anxiety and depression and
Huge.
yeah, and so I mean that's part of the reason why I want people to get care and heal more quickly because we want people to not ruin their whole life just because they hit their head.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And okay, one of the last things I wanted to ask you about is as you were, doing this podcast, as you've been going through all of your own stuff, I mean, I'd love to know just like as you were recording the podcast, you brought on all these great experts. Was there anything that you learned from the like as you were recording the podcast that you hadn't actually like heard in the last 3 years?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I learned so much because Celine went and found these experts. She went and found a bunch of the research. And so yeah, I'm listening to the experts and actually sitting there going, wow, I wish I'd known this before. I really am bummed that I didn't know this before. So there was remorse on my part, but also hope that like there is a lot of information out there and it just needs to be synthesized and in the right place, which then kind of motivated be like, okay, this ongoing resource guide is something that, I'm going to just keep building because more and more things keep coming to me. And I'm like, shoot, I wish I'd been able to try that. I wish I'd known that. But it's also like, okay, great, I'll put this forth for the next person. So I've learned so much and I'm continuing to learn so much and, probably add some different layers to some of my treatment protocols as well, based on what I'm learning. So yeah, I mean, thanks to Celine and all that, but it's been very therapeutic. As hard as it is for me to open up like this, it's been really therapeutic and educational for me, which is part of why the conversation has to happen. Because one person's going to have this and another person has that, and another person can share what they did. And I'm working with my coach, Tim Cusick, to actually I'm going to interview him and we're going to do a coaches and athlete resource list so that coaches can just go, okay, I've got it. Because even Tim, he didn't know what to do. And he's like, I'm so sorry I couldn't help you. Like, and because he wasn't educated in it. So I'm pretty excited about that stuff because I'm learning a ton. And I will say I'm no expert. And so people can share information with me and I'll put it in one place, kind of like Cliff Notes, but I don't claim to be an expert in it. I'm just sort of being a conduit for a gatherer of information for people.
Which I mean is a very needed thing though, because I mean, it's the same thing with anytime I'm, writing articles, it's distilling information into a format that people can actually then use. And, it's practical. It's not going on PubMed and looking at research papers and, all of that stuff that like, frankly, if you have a concussion, a PDF with a checklist sounds like a lot easier than trying to dig around.
Yeah, those studies and those abstracts, I mean, they're awesome, but like it's really hard to sift through the scientific information. It's really hard. So that's where Celine comes in.
Yeah, I mean, they give me a headache at the best of times,
right,
let alone.
Exactly.
Okay, before we wrap up, just let everyone know where they can listen to this limited edition podcast, where they can find you, all the things.
Yeah, the Brainstorm podcast is on the Feisty Women's Performance Network, Feisty Media. You can also get to them from my website, which is RebeccaRusch.com. And like I said, there is a resource guide right now, and there's a ton of stuff in the show notes from every single episode that's kind of specific to that episode. The last episode does kind of give a what to do checklist thing, and then we'll continue to build the resources. So this is really just the start of hopefully helping more people really, it's an invisible injury, but it doesn't need to be a silent injury. And so that is our goal, our mission with this whole Brainstorm series.
Oh, so good. Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again. It is always an absolute pleasure to have you.
You're amazing, Molly. I hope we get to ride bikes together again soon.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.